Great news. Dirty Keto is now on Amazon. If you're living in the U.S., go straight to Amazon and get Dirty Keto. Watch it, rate it, and review it. If you're outside of the U.S., meaning Western Europe or Canada or Mexico, it's not there yet. Don't ask me why. Listen, those people made me put a PG-13 rating on it when there was nothing in it that would have caused that. But let's get ahead of this thing. Let's watch it, rate it, and review it. Go get Dirty Keto right now, and on with the show.
Thanks for listening to Vinny Tortorich on NSNG Lifestyle Audio. Welcome to Fitness Confidential One-on-One. Vinny Tortorich, founder of NSNG, goes long form with top luminaries in the field of health and fitness.
I am Vinny Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. It's the Friday show. This guy was in a couple of weeks ago, but we enjoyed him so much. I had more things to talk to him about, so he's back today. I'm talking about Johnathan Edwards. But before we do that, let's hear from Bon Jovi. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how much cowboy we're talking about there. I mean, Richie Sambora had more makeup than Dame Edna in that video. And by the way, nice guy. I don't know Richie well. I've met him a couple of times. His daughter and my daughter was in the same class at the same school. And I'll tell you this about the man. Both he and his wife, he was married to Heather Locklear, showed up at all the events. They were present parents even after they divorced, and you always want to see that. You know, they were both at all the school events with the kid, supporting the kid, and you always like to see that. So I wish them all well. Johnathan, welcome back to the show, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. Love it.
There were a few things that, I wanted to get into. I try to keep these shows to an hour or less because people just don't have the bandwidth, to stick with anything. And there were a few things that and I think some of them we actually talked about after the mics went cold. And I said, wait a minute, we got to get you back again.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing is you were not just a casual cyclist, but you went up the ranks. I want to say, were you Cat 2, Cat 1? Where were you?
No, I was Cat 1, and I raced. I had a UCI license in France, and I raced a couple of elite races, like even with some of the Tour de France guys, like Christophe Laporte. I was in races with him. I was in races with Floyd Landis. Never Lance or anything like that, but so. I was that level, but
let's give the audience an idea. Look, the United States know that there's one race that goes on. They know the Tour de France, right? And that's
right.
It.
Yeah.
And they, what you have to realize is to even make it to Cat 1, that's Category 1. That's what that means.
Yeah. Yep.
You are accomplished, right?
Yep.
If you were putting it in sports, the way we understand sports in this country, you were at the top of D1 athletics in college, and the pros were looking at you. And, in fact, you were in pro races, right?
Yep, just like you. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what Cat 1 is. You're a D1 athlete, and you're not just a D1 athlete. You're someone that can make it up to the show. That's the way it works.
Right. You have a chance to participate, and you have a chance to advance from there to be, a professional cyclist, if everything goes well. Yeah. That's all right.
How many years, just to give the audience, how old are you now, Johnathan?
I am now 55.
What year did you start cycling, and when did it get serious? Like, how old were you, not what year?
That's a really good question, because I have to back up. I was an aspiring professional motocross racer up until I was 19 years old. So that's where my endurance training came in. And at that time I was running, I think my PR for a marathon was like 2:38. So I had the motor, and then long story short, broke myself up enough to realize professional motocross is probably not the way, way to go. Bless my mom's heart. And off I went, in search of medical school, where I went to UC Davis, and that's where I started cycling. And I had I just joined the team, and right away I went from D, C, D all the way to to A. I was pretty good after I got some miles under my leg. And the coach Sean Wilson there, he's a physiologist now at Loma Linda. He coached me, and so did Alan Lim, who you might know of. So
Alan Lim, he's been around for a long time. When you want to talk about getting in shape, this guy, the magazines even picked up on Alan a lot, and he wrote a lot of articles back in the day. But go on.
Yeah, so that's where I started my cycling career, and then I got good enough at UC Davis. I was on that collegiate team, so to speak, and I had, I'd worked my ass off, and excuse my French, I got into medical school, but I was also, A level, Cat 1 level of cycling at that time. And I kind of, for a brief moment, I made, I was like, gosh, should I go on with cycling and hold off on my medical career? And nah, just go to medical school. And then I got through medical school, and then I kept racing on and off. And then once I got done with medical school, anesthesiology residency, which is really intense. And then once I got done with that, I realized that I had, still some left in me. And then I worked my way up to, Cat 4, Cat 3, Cat 2, found myself at the Gila stage race, and placing well there. And, and then what really did it for me, they combined the Cat 1 and 2s in the California State race. And I placed top 10 in that, and that kind of got me to Cat 1. And then I spent, a year there in my 30s, mind you. And after that, once I reached my goal, then I went to Masters, and then I raced into my 40s, and and that's about what I did with it. Now I did some racing in France too, as I told you, and that was pretty cool. So that was an epic experience. And but the amount of suffering you go through to get there, it's hard to explain to people who don't understand cycling at that level. You either got the switch or you don't. And it's it's a labor of love, and you just have to turn off your head sometimes and turn the pedals and hope you have it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You made me remember, I was like a freshman in college, and again, I was on a D1 scholarship for football, and these people that come in, they're always paying groups and everything to come in and test all the players and the whole thing. And I'll never forget, they do all these tests on you, like they'll have, like you put your hand on a thing, and when you see a light bulb come on, you have to hit something really fast. They're checking reflexes and this and that and all this stuff. VO2 max, they're checking, just all sorts of things. You have, it looks like as I always say, it looks like you're in a Gatorade commercial. They're catching your respiration and they're plugging your muscles to see what your saturation is.
I did all that.
I ended up doing it too later on in college, but at first, that's how I got interested in it. These groups would come in and collect this data. And I remember they were telling me that, I'll never forget this. this guy says, you're in the wrong sport, right? And I was like, yeah, I get it. I'm undersized for football. I get it. I was there because I was really fast, right? Like me playing linebacker today would just never happen, right? I wouldn't, I was there because I was fast and I can catch the guy with the ball. I can find him and catch him.
And your VO2 max was 75 or something like that.
It was crazy. And the guy goes, you should be in a velodrome.
Yep.
And I said to him, this is 18-year-old Vinny.
Wow.
I said, what's a velodrome? I didn't know. I never heard the word velodrome before. Right?
Right.
And he's like, Olympic cycling. I said, oh, when they ride up the wall and come down the other side, because I'd seen it on Wide World of Sports. That was my reference point. Yep. And he's like, yeah, when they ride up on the wall and come down. And, he was explaining, he says, your legs, you have the power, you got the mitochondria, you got this and that. If you just trained a certain way, you would be this. And I was like, well, I'm here on the scholarship, so I don't know what a velodrome is, and this is good enough for me. And wouldn't you know it, that when I was trying to lose weight after college, I found the bicycle, right?
Nice. Yep.
And, always kind of confusing to people. Look, I did ultra cycling, right, which is different than regular cycling. We do everything much slower. But I have tons of races where I brought the first 200 miles in somewhere between 9 hours and 15 minutes and 9 hours and 45 minutes. And by the way, we're not allowed to draft. Right. And there's a lot of desert landscape where you're going uphill at a 5 and 6% grade. So when you can lay those kind of numbers down in an ultra race, that's, because you're going 500-600 miles, and this is the first 200 miles.
Right.
Right. So I guess I had some kind of chops that had I grown up in Europe or found UC Davis, where it's probably the biggest cycling ground in this country, right? Yep. You were right in the heart of it. I mean, I used to go up and do the Davis Double every year, and there was another one in Solvang, the Solvang 200.
Yeah.
I finished that one in 9 hours and 30 minutes. Right? No drafting.
Wow.
And you know what it's like in Solvang, right? That's no joke.
Yeah.
I remember that year when I did it, it was rainy and cold all day. I just wanted off the fucking bike. It's like, I got to get there. I got to get out of this. But yeah, when people ask, how do you get there? The big thing people want to know about, and they don't really understand, and I'm going to have you etch it out for us. They want to know about VO2 max because they hear people like Alan Lim talk about it. They hear Chris Carmichael talk about it. They buy into these programs. Michele Ferrari talks about it, right? Yeah. All of these guys talk about it, but they don't really understand what VO2 max means. And you don't exactly get there by doing zone 2 training, right?
Nope. Not
zone 2 training is a big giant base, and I'm a big proponent of zone 2 training. Mm-hmm. But VO2 max, you got to do yourself some intervals to get there. Why don't you, and pretend we're in third grade, John, and explain it to us.
So, I mean, at its most basic level, you think of VO2, that it's just how you use oxygen to create mechanical energy. Period. I mean, the end point or the output of VO2 or VO2 max is mechanical energy. How hard can you run? Push your feet against the earth to go faster. Push your feet against the pedals to go faster, or walk for a long time, or whatever it is. It's how you utilize oxygen to burn your carbohydrates and fats to create mechanical energy. And our bodies are the only perpetual energy machine that we know of where you use it and you create more energy.
Explain that.
Well, so when you take in oxygen and you take in carbohydrates and you take in fats, which, your body has all those stored except the oxygen, it's broken down into oxygen and glucose, just to keep it simple. Fats is another thing, into acetyl-CoA and all that. But when you move, you increase your metabolism and you increase the energy output. So when you're aerobic, you increase, the energies, the cell's currency called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, produced from the mitochondria, and that's what gives you the energy to, push harder, work harder, reach further. So the more you use it, the more energy you make. The less you use it, the less energy you make, which, if you think about sedentary, and you look at mitochondrial production of ATP, it's less. When you look at trained athletes with a VO2, they make more. So VO2 max is just that ceiling of oxygen utilization, or the amount of oxygen you can suck in your lungs, which was all done by A.V. Hill in the 1930s, the first physiologist to do this. And he showed that, there's a plateau to this oxygen consumption. And that's what VO2 max is. And VO2 max is not, it is and it isn't. It's not the point, where you're shaking your head, you can't go anymore and you're about to pass out. You actually touch VO2 max well before that. So if you want to put it in perspective, Usain Bolt, he runs about 80% of his race at VO2 max. 20% he doesn't.
Okay, so let's take Usain Bolt. He finishes his race in usually shy of 10 seconds, unless he's running the 200.
Right.
When does VO2 max kick in, and when does it let off? When does that 20% happen? Is it the first 3 seconds?
Yeah, excellent question. About the first, he's spending about almost 2 seconds to try to get his VO2 to touch his VO2 max.
Right.
And then throughout the race, he reaches his complete VO2 max, which is still a slight slope, not quite a plateau. It still goes up just a little bit, but that's by definition VO2 max. And then at the end of it, at about half a second to go, he really, I think if I remember the studies, he taps, it taps out and he almost like loses it.
Right.
So at the last 0.3 seconds or something like that, I could be wrong. I have to look at that again. But so anyway, at the beginning and a very minute part at the end is where he's not at his VO2 max. So. Okay.
So people are going to sit there and go, I'm not Usain Bolt. Why does this matter to me? So I'm a guy that, since we tell people to eat very low carb, and of course you have enough carbohydrate that your body maintains homeostasis, so you have sugar in your blood, your liver, and your muscles.
Sure.
And I purport to say that I can go all day long at less than 80% of my aerobic capacity, which puts you squarely in zone 2.
Yep. And
never touch my sugar. I've proven that on several occasions where I've done Mount Whitney on a 13-hour round trip. And if I took anything, the first time I did it with nothing but coconut oil to prove that you can do it with, And as a matter of fact, I didn't even need the coconut oil. My body ran on its own fat for that 14-hour trip. We spent an hour up there and just sat there. And the only thing I had was water and electrolytes all day long. I proved it on Mont Blanc, a much longer day.
Yep.
Much colder, right? You can stay in zone 2 forever. A good friend of mine, Michael McKnight, who's an ultra runner. He proved that you can go 200 miles running and staying in zone 2 and never touch your sugar stores. Right? So these are all N1 experiments, but it works, right?
More than that now. Yeah.
Yeah. And my good buddy Tim Noakes, Dr. Timothy Noakes, got athletes into zone 3. Can't remember if it was 84 or 86% of their aerobic capacity, and kept them there. He trained them up to where they can be in zone 3. Now, and I said this to Tim, you only kept them on a treadmill for a couple of hours or whatever the deal was. At some point, you were going to burn through that blood glycogen. You were going to bonk at some point. When? I don't know. But he proved that you could go deep into zone 3 and keep it there. But we're talking about zone 4 here. We're talking about when VO2 max matters, right, where the rubber meets the road. And for that, that's why I tell people, I call it the sugar trickle. If you're going to do something, if you're going to do an all-out race and it's something like a triathlon, it's an Ironman distance triathlon, you're going to leave some sugar in that water when you swim, right? Because your body's trying to maintain 98.6. Water is going to start drawing from you. You're going to get on a 112-mile bike ride, and you're not going for a cruise. You're going to try to do your best.
Right.
So you're going to be in upper zone 3 most of that 112 miles, probably 5+ hours. And then you got a damn marathon to run. And people go, whoa, well, Vinny, if you're eating fat and just eating fat and protein works, why doesn't it work there? Well, the human body was never meant to do a fucking Ironman. Sorry, just wasn't.
Not at that intensity, yeah.
Right? Yeah, we're talking about this great intensity. The human body was never set up. So if you're going to do that and you're going to start running through your blood glycogen, you need to take it on. As a matter of fact, as I tell everyone, when I do mountaineering, I bring sugary stuff with me. I stop at the store and buy Lifesavers or something that won't melt or get too cold. And they'll go, why do you bring that? It's like, in case of an emergency, I'm running from a bear or I'm outrunning an avalanche, which when you're on a glacier, that's a possibility. I get stuck in an avalanche. I need to live. I'm going to need to get my blood sugar where it used to be if I want to survive, right? So some people will look at me and go, Van, if you say you don't need sugar, why do you need sugar? Well, because we need to maintain homeostasis. Explain the difference between the two and when one cuts off and the other one kicks in, meaning where we drop off with zone 2 and where we pick up with VO2 max. And then I want to get into, and you can just meander into this, how we get stronger VO2 max, how we get that mitochondria to work with our alveoli and the oxygen we're taking in building up our bodies.
Sure. So the all the zones mean is just you're utilizing more oxygen to, for the mechanical energy you're producing. It still comes down to that. So zone 2, you're whatever at 80% like you said, or a little less, and then zone 3, you're above that, and then you have zone 4 and zone 5, and then in zone 4 is where you start touching VO2 max. In zone 5, you're certainly in VO2 max, and you're only going to keep that for so long. Why does it matter? So why does you asked the question, like, why does VO2 max matter? Well, that's longevity. How long you're going to live depends on your VO2 max.
Explain.
And so the more muscle you have, the more ability you have to use oxygen in your muscle and mitochondria and your other tissues defines your longevity. So many studies have been done showing the longevity curve to closely correspond with your VO2. And I work with a professor called Dr. Veronique Balat, and she we wrote a book together called The Science of the Marathon, and she did a TED Talk one time that I hope to do in English one day, saying that many people in the audience probably have a VO2 of 25, and they're 25 years old. Wow. That doesn't bode well for longevity. And we did some work. She worked with a 105-year-old cyclist named Robert Marchand, or Robert Marchand, and I suppose English. And the trick to he set the hour record at 105 years old.
I remember that. When was that done? Why am I remembering this guy?
Because he set the 100-year-old record, he set the 103-year-old record, and he set the 105-year-old record, and he cycled 27 kilometers in 1 hour.
Wow.
Or something like, or 17 miles an hour, I think it was. I have to go look back at the speeds, but I mean, yeah, at 105. So part of that was building his VO2. You know, Dr. Balat increased his VO2 from the low 30s into the 40s. And that's what got him into
At that age.
At that age, right. I mean, you know, at most people at 60 years old have their VO2 truly sits in the high 20s, maybe low 30s. And I mean, that corresponds to the scientific fact that most people over 65, almost up to 70% of them in most studies, can't get off the floor with one or two hands. Think about that.
I can still do it with no hand. You know, it's like I do all the things.
With no hands, right. Yeah.
Right. It's like I keep doing all the things because I'm not afraid of aging. You know, I'll never get any kind of stuff done to my face. I'm not afraid of looking old and losing hair and all the things that happen, right? Yeah, because that all happens. I'm afraid of not being able to do things. Right. And my friends all say to me, "Are you dying?" I say, "Why?" It's like, you know, because you're always doing everything. And it's like, yeah, this is all we have, right? And you mentioned motocross, right? Yeah. I get on a motorcycle. I don't own a motorcycle anymore. I used to do a lot of road riding, and I did some motocross back in the day, but not serious, right? Just, you know, beating around. I know a guy that's got a track in his backyard about 10 miles away from me, and he's got a bunch of bikes there, and he knows I can ride. So he's like, yeah, take a helmet, take some knee pads and some knee braces and go. Yeah. You know, and I go mess around with it. I wish I could go more. I just don't have time to go do motocross. But I want to still get the feeling. I want to know that I can crash those bikes into turns and pull them out of turns and do all the things, right? Still get some air.
Freedom unexplained, man.
Yeah, and I don't think you were mentioning it at the beginning. I don't think people realize the kind of shape you have to be in to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to switch gears to motocross, I mean, it's one of the most physical sports in the world, you know, because you're using your legs, your arms, you know, and I mean, outdoors especially, I mean, you're just taking bumps, it's kind of like riding a bucking bronco, except, you know, you have a kill switch.
And it's like riding a bucking bronco, but that only lasts 8 seconds, right? This keeps going, especially like if you're going through whoops, like every time you come around that track and you're going through the whoops and you're controlling that, right? And you know, it's like, Jesus Christ, and this never ends. And you're the guy controlling it, and you got to keep pouring on the gas and, you know, just banking it into these turns and pulling it out and the whole thing. It's the most I come home from doing that, and it's like, man, I thought I was in shape. But the next day I wake up, and there's areas of my body I'd forgotten that I owned, right? You know, people talk about torso and what is it? Oh, build up your core. You want to build up your core? Go jump on a dirt bike and watch what happens.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And that's great.
I can say the same thing. You know, I really got into rowing during the pandemic to the point where I went, okay, now I need to learn how to actually, because I call all indoor stuff like rowing and indoor cycling, I call that masturbation, right? You're not actually doing the sport, you're masturbating. And so I wanted to learn how to row in the water. And you come back, and once you start rowing in the water, it's like, oh, wait, you're now using different muscles because you got to keep that boat up. You know, your hands aren't just straight on some bar that's in front of you from concept 2. Those oars go out, and then you're bringing them in. You start working muscles, and you're moving a lot slower, and you look at your heart rate, and it's like, oh, shit, I'm going right out of zone 2 here, right? And the
VO2 with rowing is intense. Some of the highest VO2s ever recorded were with rowers.
Well, yeah, because you're working probably – I'm going to put my exercise physiology hat on and say you got to be between 75 and 85% of all of the muscles in your body when you're rowing, right? It's got to be that high. And, you know, the guys that get these 2,000-meter records, and then you watch it online, they fall off of the rowing machine. They're not faking that.
No.
Like your body doesn't work at the end of that. You cannot function. Right. The fact that you're not crapping yourself and peeing all over the place is you're done, right? And the only thing I've ever done that comes close to that is cross-country skiing, right?
And that's another sport where the high VO2 maxes are always recorded.
So we're going to talk about how to get your VO2 max up and how often, how frequent you have to do these kind of training sessions. But before we do that, folks, you're not going to go anywhere if your body's not equipped with the right oil. I'm talking about Villa Capelli olive oil. Villa Capelli, the longest running sponsor of this show. We're going to talk about this in just a second, VO2 max, but I remember way back, I want to say it was in Sarajevo, maybe before that, maybe Lillehammer, when the Italian 4x10,000 cross-country team beat the, I want to say the guys from Norway or Sweden.
Either Norway or Sweden.
Yeah, one of those. And they weren't supposed to. And as it turns out, they went and looked at what those guys ate. It was a lot of red wine and olive oil. And I'm not making that up. You could go look it up. We got to figure out when that was, by the way. But it was olive oil. I'm telling you, olive oil is what your body needs. In this country, you can cut it up to 40% and still call it 100% pure olive oil. We allow that kind of lying to go on in this country. Go figure, right? Go get Villa Capelli. Let them know we sent you. Promo code Vinny, V-I-N-N-I-E, gets you 10% off. If you spend more than $140 after the discount, you're still above $125. They'll give you free shipping. So go to Villa Capelli, spend a bunch of money, get a lot of savings, and let them know we sent you. It's one of the supplements I take around here, so you guys might want to try it wherever you are, because look at me, I'm 62, and I've only had cancer twice. We're talking to Johnathan Edwards. Johnathan, I tell people, I talk to a lot of morbidly obese people, and at first they can't move, right? Once they lose 50, 75, 100 pounds, I try to get them walking. Some of these people are 600 plus pounds. Their frame can't handle them even walking very far. But as soon as I could get them into zone 2 training, getting on a treadmill, maybe getting a stationary bike at home, something to get their body moving, I get them into zone 2. That's why I love Phil Maffetone so much. That's why Mark Allen, who's been on this show more times than any other athlete. But I'm a big proponent of getting some interval training in order to keep my VO2 max up. Explain what that number means. You'll say, oh, some of these kids are in their 20s. When you're 60, you should be at least 30. Explain how you measure VO2 max, and then explain how we can get it up.
Yep. VO2 max is measured just, by measuring oxygen intake and CO2 output. And then we're able to graph that in relation to your intensity effort, which is usually the Borg scale. And then through those analyzers, we can graph and actually see how many milliliters of oxygen you consume per minute. And so that score, that milliliters of oxygen per minute consumed, is your VO2, and that maximal is your VO2 max. So, and then and again, VO2 max is not just one peak; it's actually a plateau, and most people don't realize that.
Okay, so but that's all good and fine, and no one understood what you just said, right?
Right.
give it to us in practical terms.
So it's just the amount. Yes, the amount. So you breathe oxygen. You have to breathe oxygen to survive. It exists at 21% in the air. So, 20 parts. All air contains 20 parts oxygen, 80% nitrogen about. So you breathe that in. That, if you just follow the oxygen cell, goes into your lungs. These little cells called alveoli, those are your lung cells. They have a way of exchanging that oxygen into your blood. And that oxygen has a way of going into your blood or your circulation, into your cells. Once it makes it into your cells, whether it be muscle, liver, heart, whatever, it goes into what's called the mitochondria, which is contained in the cells. And within that mitochondria, oxygen takes place in a reaction called the TCA cycle, or tricarboxylic acid cycle.
Right.
And that's what produces, with glucose and oxygen, into the, back up. That glucose goes in the electron transport chain, and then oxygen works in the electron transport chain, and then your energy currency is the end product called ATP. And so that's all the in reaction, if you will. The out product of all that is CO2, carbon dioxide. So oxygen goes in, CO2 comes out. And we have to measure the oxygen in, and we have to measure what the output is from the cells, which is CO2. And I guess that would probably be the most basic way, in a sense, without diagrams and all that, to just say it in words.
The thing I always worry about is I'm sitting here and I understand it because I lived it, right? And I know the Krebs cycle better than I know my own wife, right? So it's I understand it, but the audience is going to sit there and go, okay, so in practical terms, in real practical terms, how can someone get their VO2 max up? So let's take a spinner, right? How can someone get, because at the end of the day, we're talking about increasing mitochondria, as I like to call it, the scrubbing bubbles of energy in our system. For the lack of, I try to put everything in a cartoon so that people can understand it, right? So in order to make ATPs, and ATP is affecting the mitochondria, if you get on a bike and you want to get faster on the bike, you want that mitochondria to go up, you want that VO2 max to go up, what would the protocol be on the spinner? What would you do day in and day out?
I would do a combination of a couple of things, and one might be pretty novel to you. It's called the training through, what I like to do with amateurs is training through their perceptions. So like on a spin bike, you would say, what's easy for you? Or if you're running, what's medium pace for you? And what's hard pace for you? And the professor I've worked with, Veronica Palat, and what I wrote about in the Science of the Marathon, is that you can actually statistically be at VO2 max longer if you run by your perceptions, which is kind of that fartlek running, And so let's say you're on a spinner and your hard pace is about what you can keep up for 3 minutes or so. Your medium pace is what you can keep up for about 5 minutes or so. Your easy pace you can keep up for 10 plus minutes pretty, no problem.
Right.
But let's just say you do 30 30s. So I might say, okay, after a good warm up, like a 10-minute warm up, go do like 10 30 30s. So that would mean ramp it up really hard for 30 seconds. Don't drop it all the way back to easy, but just drop it back to something tolerable in your medium pace.
Mm-hmm.
And I would work with that person to first do like a set of 10 of those, and then the rest of the workout might be zone 2, or just getting them to complete 30 minutes for goodness sake, right?
Yeah.
And then so what does that do? That variable pace training, believe it or not, will help you spend more time near VO2 max than, say, if you just rode only at zone 2, 3 constantly. And the advantage of it is, as you know, lactate, for example, it's the lactate levels, not lactic acid as the misnomer is. It's lactate, and then you have acid in the cells. But you can actually control your lactate levels better doing that. And this method is the only way that I know of that you can 100% avoid the bunk or the wall of a marathon. So it's called variable pace training. So that's one part of it, and then the second part of it, of how you would increase your VO2 max, is through zone 2 training or maffetone training, or, you just go out there and, like, for 30 to 60 minutes and just, run only or cycle only at a certain heart rate, and let your body do what it's going to do, but don't push it over that. Just let your body tap into what it has at that metabolic rate. And so between those two, you can take a beginner and actually get them somewhere, and in less time. And all of us, working stiffs who have, 5-day-a-week jobs, 4-day-a-week jobs, or we're parents or whatever, this is the kind of thing you should be looking at. It's, it's not elite training, and you shouldn't treat like an elite athlete. Where the goal of this kind of training is to increase your VO2 max, decrease injury, have more fun at it, and decrease the time you spend doing it, so you can have more time doing other stuff. So that's kind of philosophy I work on with some folks.
Yeah, it's funny, when I was coming through college in the early 80s, we were still talking about fartlek running and how well that works. And folks, just so it doesn't sound like we're saying, goofy fart jokes here. Yeah, fartlek was this guy who came up with this thing, and it was if you go out for a jog, and this is the way it was explained to us in college. You go out for a jog, and you go, okay, you're going down the road, and you see a bunch of telephone poles. It's like, okay, I'm gonna just keep this steady pace for 10 telephone poles, and then for the next 3, I'm gonna sprint all out, and then you go back down to running just at an easy pace for X number of telephone poles, or until you got to the oak tree, and then you would go 3/4 speed, but you would go a little longer, right? So it was like doing all this variable, I can't say the word, variable training.
Variable pace.
Yeah, you just pace it up. Sometimes you're going all out, sometimes you're going 3/4, sometimes you're going half speed, and you just keep changing it up. And I remember doing that, and as a kid, because I lived out in the country, it worked like a charm, right? It really did work. And then I got, as I like to call it, more scientific, because when you have, the indoor tools, the masturbation tools, it's easier to keep a steady pace. So, like, if what I would do is, I always believe in getting, like the song from Spinal Tap, a big bottom, right? Just work for weeks and weeks and weeks, 10, 12 weeks of just building up a lot of zone 2. Just keep building up, and the volume comes in time, right? So a long ride at the beginning might be an hour. By the time you get to week 12, a long period might be 6 or 7 hours on the bike, just building up all of that zone 2. And then once a week, maybe twice a week, but usually once a week, in the middle of a workout, start doing some intervals, right?
Yeah.
And, people go, how do I do intervals? I heard you do this, you do that. It's like you could change it up. There's ways to get there. If I'm doing 30 seconds on, I'm doing 30 seconds off. If I work up to 45 seconds on, I'm doing 45 seconds off. If I get to a minute on, I'm doing a minute off. And they go, well, how many? Well, at first, you might be doing 5 or 6, and that's it. When you can't do it anymore, that's all you got, right? But later on, as you get into better interval shape, 6 becomes 7 intervals, it becomes 8 intervals, and as you said, it can become 10 intervals. But then you warm down for the rest. And you've done something because when you get off of that bike and you shower off, all you want to do is take a nap, right? It just literally your body is going, let me relax now.
So one thing I want to bring up, though, you'd say, like, how do we measure this VO2 max? And this kind of ties it in. So one of Veronique Ballat's other seminal pieces of work is that she showed that you can do by perception, no watch, no anything, no heart rate, no speed, just by your perceptions. You run 10 minutes easy. You run 1 minute. It's called the rabbit test. Mm-hmm. And she calls it the Running Advisor Billet Training Test. And this, you can see in the book, but basically it's a combination of running easy, medium, and hard at a prescribed level. And you can plug in the numbers, the speed, the heart rate, the time, and you can plug it into an algorithm, and it will spit out your VO2 max within 5% of a laboratory test.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that was her. Look up Veronique Ballat and, that test. And, she defined all that. And, she's not well known here because she's French, but think about the power of that, being able to go out on a run for 30 minutes and enter your data and come out with a VO2 max.
Right.
That, to me, that's what really helped me buy into this variable pace training and some of the strategies that go along with it. I thought that was a really powerful thing. And that's, and even the elites kind of do some of it,
Yeah,
I tested it myself. It works.
Was it within 5% when you tested it yourself?
Yep. I did it 3 years ago. My VO2 max on the machine was 58, and it was 56 on this test.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I might try something like that just to see where I am now. Just to see if I can still do it. Because I am in pretty good aerobic shape. I had to step back a bunch because my hematocrit level is still at 38 right now. I'm still dealing with cladribine. Just fucks you up when you're on chemo. It just takes everything out of you. And but it's odd, even having such a low hematocrit level, and just the red blood cells, it still looks like Kool-Aid, right? But I'm able to do really good zone 2. I was on the water yesterday. I did 12,000 meters out on the water. And I feel good. I get out of the water and I feel good, but I'm just not there right now. I would hate to do that kind of test right now, knowing that, my red blood cells are not going to carry enough oxygen to the active muscles. So maybe I'll wait a few more months. Right?
We'll get you on an oxygen. We'll get you on some, this is what the elite guys do. Up at altitude, they'll get a big oxygen tank with the nasal cannula, turn it up to like 5, 6, 7, 8, and do their intervals on oxygen at altitude. And it gives them another gear,
Yeah, and that all goes down to the train low, sleep high method, which I'm a big proponent of. And I did the reverse of that when I was training for one of my ultra races back in the early 2000s, where one of the companies sent me a tent. So I was living in the tent whenever I was sleeping.
Hypoxico, yeah.
Yeah, hypoxic tent. I can't remember which one I made a deal with, but they sent it to me for free. And so the idea is you're at sea level, so you can train harder at sea level. You have more oxygen at sea level than if you're at 8 or 10,000 feet, but you're
Right.
sleeping at, you're basically pumping nitrogen in those things, and you're sleeping at, and
I've slept many a nights in those.
oh God, and the sweating you do, and my dog would be in there with me, so the smell that came out of that thing. Luckily, I wasn't in a relationship at the time, but
Yeah.
my dog insisted, "Hey, I'm coming in that thing too. If you're going to be in there, I need to be next to you." And I was like, "All right, come on."
I made one out of trash bags once.
Really?
Yeah. I reverse engineered an oxygen concentrator, and because that's all it is it's the exhaust of an oxygen concentrator. Think about it. So I just reverse engineered it, put the tube into that, and then we sealed up with PVC pipe and two layers of trash bags from Lowe's or whatever.
Yeah.
And it worked.
When you think about it, you could buy like a 6-man tent and just put it around your bed and do the same thing. Those things are sealed off pretty good.
Right.
So there are ways to do it. But, I those things are pretty amazing. And they work, but you got to be in them for like 10, 12 hours a day.
Oh, no, they consume your life, but yeah, as you know, when we're trying to get to that level, you dedicate a lot of your life. And, I was just like you, I was single back then. And, I was able to kind of, tune back into how do you get to Cat 1? Pretty hard to do with the family, I think.
It is. My wife would never stand for it now, and I'm not racing, so why do it?
Right.
But folks, you're going to ask me later on. Hypoxico is one of the companies, and Colorado Altitude Training is the other. There's basically two companies in the country that will do these things. So if you want to go check that out and you got some money to waste, I think they'll rent those things to you, for it ain't cheap. I can tell you that. But if they'll send you one for free, that's the way you want to go. Let's switch gears a little bit. Chronic pain. At this stage, I live in it, right? I have a neck that has bone on bone. My lower back is always, tight. And today I had leg day in the gym, and my back allowed me to do squats with the bar on my shoulders. Some days when I go in, I don't even attempt to get under the squat bar. I'll just do leg press. Now they have these things where you can put the thing around your waist, right, and do squats just from your waist down, so you can take your lower back essentially out of it and still work your legs. I even did sissy squats today. People don't do sissy squats anymore. But I said, I haven't done sissy squats in a couple of months. I'm going to do those today. So it was leg press, it was squats, it was the whole thing. I can wake up tomorrow morning, my back will be seized up or not, right? But there's always some amount of tension in my lower back, and I can reach down and pick up a feather, and it will go out, right?
Yep.
So what is that? Why can't I get it straight? I always hear it's a form of dehydration. I don't know how much more hydrated I can be during the day.
It's not dehydration as you think about like in your body. It's what probably people are referring to. What you have is disc dehydration or disc desiccation, and I mean that's going a little ahead of the game. But in low back pain, you have your vertebrae, and then you have your shock absorbers called the discs, the vertebral discs,
right?
And those help create space between your vertebrae where, those nerves come out. And when they get desiccated, that can lower the height of those discs, which is one reason we get shorter as we age. And it can also, that shortening can also cause a mechanical pressure on the nerves, coming out of your spinal canal. And that can lead to, I think, 8% of the U.S. population has to some degree that keeps them out of work for weeks at a time, called lumbar back pain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's it's a significant thing in every country. Back pain is one of the most expensive things we have, and one of those things, I guess, to wrap it around, if you have back pain, you don't feel like going and riding your bike or running or walking and increasing your VO2 max for longevity. You're just like, gosh, how do I get out of this pain to like have a normal dinner,
Right.
So anyway, so to go back to your comment about the dehydration, it's probably that, that the discs have become dehydrated over time and with injury. And that leads to lumbar syndromes, sciatica, we call it, it leads to foot drop, really bad things sometimes. And it's a debilitating thing. So that's what chronic pain, it's one big part of chronic pain.
Well, look, I've tried everything. I've tried, CBD seems to help a little bit, but you have to take some crazy amount of it under your tongue X number of times per day. And that can get very expensive. But apparently it feels like it takes a little, it kind of works like ibuprofen. It takes a little bit of the inflammation out. I refuse to live on ibuprofen. I refuse to take any kind of Class C narcotics. I've tried just out of desperation. I'm not a big believer in chiropractics, but I've tried several chiropractors, and I'm going to be honest, there was one that I didn't go to professionally. I would see him. People have heard him on this podcast. His name is Dr. Stephen Hussey. And Stephen, we've been at, parties together, like, because, we've been talking on the same stage, and they'll have like a speaker's party. And Stephen will say, hey, man, just get on the floor there. And he'll crack my neck and the whole thing. I'll say, Jesus Christ, my neck feels better for the rest of the night. Why can't the guy who took the x-rays, who charged me a lot of money, why can't he make me feel better? Right? So none of these guys are exactly like the other guy. Right. Stephen, he's done stuff to my lower back where I went, oh, that feels a percentage better, a significant percentage better. Yeah. Right? And why can't the guy who I'm paying, who's got the fancy table, who's got me on this table trying to crack me, can't even crack me? I don't know how these guys work. So it's not everyone's equal there. I've had doctors telling me, oh, we could do PRP, we could do dry pricking, we could do all this stuff. It's expensive as hell, and they tell you up front, it might not work. It probably won't work, right? So what is there, and what can we do?
Well, as you mentioned a couple PRP. At the end of the day, I tell people healing is energy in motion. I don't care what you're doing. Any type of healing, there's always some type of energy that's put in motion. Albert George Szent is a Hungarian Nobel laureate who came up with that quote, so I always chalk it down to that. So, you can do PRP, which is, taking your own fluids, spinning them down, and hopefully the growth factors get in the right places. You can do ibuprofen, which blocks the pain. It's kind of like a Band-Aid. What does it do? It keeps you moving. Anything to keep you moving. Hypnosis, it doesn't matter, So anything to avoid surgery anyway, because as you know, surgery is a flip of a coin. Yeah. Especially when you're coming to backs. So one thing when I trained in France, I had the privilege of working with a physician named Dr. Bernard Guez, who created percutaneous hydrotomy. So it's a complicated word. Percutaneous is through the skin. Hydrotomy is to hydrate. And basically what he used was a model of mesotherapy to treat musculoskeletal pain, including back pain. And think of it, it's pretty simple, actually. So we're using the subcutaneous skin, so let's say you have back pain over your lower back, you can pull some of that skin, right? And it's compliant. So through a mesotherapy needle, you can place physiologic saline, anti-inflammatories, sometimes steroids if needed, depends on the deal, vitamins, amino acids, trace minerals, some other medications, and create a slow-release depot over the area of pain. And it's just another tool that often decreases the pain and increases your function. And by doing that, we're not talking a miracle here, but it's another, say if you have a buffet of treatments that we do for back pain nowadays, it's one of them. And that's what I tried to tell people. And, it's not the end all. And I wrote a book on it with Dr. Gez, because before he only had a cursory book in French on it. So I completed the book in English. And yeah, that's what I have out now. And it's helped. I mean, it's I just treated a patient with shoulder pain today with it, in fact. So it's, it is. It's, in a sense, it's treating something with water, man. I mean, it's pretty cool. And then right there at UCLA, a professor named Roy Altman proved that, hey, saline is not just a placebo. It actually is a treating substance. And I go through all that in my book and in my Substacks. And, I tell everybody it's worth a try,
right?
And it's going to be part of what you do. Is it going to be the end all? No, but it's something reasonable. It's something safe, and it's not going to break the bank.
Right. So. And, that's, I'm willing to try anything within reason. But when people, if it's not going to break the bank, I'm willing to give it a shot. My wife jumps on me sometimes because I'll come in and stretch in the morning. I'll warm up and stretch, and I'll leave here limping more than when I started stretching. And you've overdone it again. Right, because I do, but I'm with you. It's like I want to move the joints. I want to move all of the areas, and yeah, sometimes I get into it a little too much, and I'll leave worse than when I walked in. So that can be a problem. But yeah, I'm willing to try it. I wanted to try it when I was go on.
Yeah, we got it. Well, I was going to say one of the first guys I did it on was a UFC fighter named Bo Nickel, and he's pretty high in the UFC right now, but he had a debilitating back pain that they did epidurals for. And this trainer named Coach Cal, or Sam Calavita, he's the one who kind of pointed me towards it. And then I got to meet Dr. Gez, and I did training with them. But anyway, we used it on Bo Nickel, and I tell the story in the book. And you should consider having Sam on one day. He's a fascinating fellow to talk with.
Oh, I'd love to.
But anyway, yeah. But anyway, I've done it with a lot of UFC guys and motocross guys who've had back pain, just as well as others who have degenerative disc disease just from age and things like that. And I've had, I have studies on it. It's done well, and it's helped a lot of people. And so I'm pretty happy and proud. I brought it around, and it's worth a try. And I hope we're going to do it.
You keep mentioning the book. Let people know what that book is so they can go and find it.
This is the book right here, Stopping Pain. So you can see by Johnathan Edwards, MD, Bernard Gez. It's on Amazon. It's published by Skyhorse Publications, or I just signed with them actually, and so they'll be distributing it from here on out.
Good.
And then so it's on Amazon, and there's reviews. You can look on my website on JonathanEdwardsMD.com. It's there. Yeah, and then there's a couple French the French percutaneous hydrotomy.net is another one in France. But yeah, I'm reachable, so you can always reach. You can always ask questions.
Yeah, I'm going to catch up with you. We're going to be in the same room at some point. I would love to try that. I was out in L.A. taking care of some business last week, but I got on the plane. I got there. I got back because they make me check my neutrophils before I fly right now, and they were up. So I was able to get there, do my business, get back on the plane, and get back. Because if I stayed there too long, I would have to get blood tests again just to fly back.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I can't as you know, if my neutrophils drop too much, and someone sneezes next to me, and I'm screwed. So I'm dealing with that. So, at any rate, we'll make that the final word, folks. You know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon to buy that book by Johnathan Edwards, go to VinnyTartaridge.com. Click through the banner. We'll put it in the Vinny Book Club so that you guys can find it. Go there. By the way, my new movie is still out there. Dirty Keto is doing really well on Amazon.
Dirty Keto. Yeah.
Did you watch Dirty Keto, Johnathan?
Yeah, I watched. I'm not through all of it yet, but I got through a good part of it. Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. So that's another sale right there. I didn't send it to him for free. Johnathan had to go buy that thing or rent it for $2 or whatever it is. Get it, rate it, review it, do all the things. And I appreciate that. Johnathan, stay on because I'm going to play a little music here. If you don't stay on, then we're going to lose the whole damn thing. As you know, everything reminds me of a song, and Johnathan reminded me of this song while we were talking. So on behalf of Johnathan Edwards, my name is Vinny Tartaridge. Put life into living and do it with the group Spinal Tap. Yeah. Big Bottom. I love that they're all playing basses in this version of it, John.
I love bass, I know.
Yeah. You remember the words in this?
Oh, it's been a while.
It's coming up. You're going to hear it. I love it. It's so fucking funny.
You're not the first person I've heard trade through
The bigger the cushion, the sweeter the pushing. That's what I said. The looser the waistband, the deeper the quicksand. Or so I have read. My baby fits me like a flesh tuxedo. I like to sink her with my pink torpedo. Big bottom, talk about bum cakes. My girl got 'em. Big bottom, drive me out of my mind. How could I leave this behind?
Thank you for listening to Fitness Confidential. Get more information at VinnyTortaridge.com. Remember to rate and review us on iTunes and follow Vinny on Instagram and Twitter.